ישועות ונחמות נזכר ונכתב לפניך אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל חיים טובים ולשלום אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל חיים טובים ולשלום
There we go. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Shana Tova to everybody. Thank you to Rabbi Bruk, who's smiling so nicely up there, and to everybody who has joined us on Facebook Live as well. It's going to be a wonderful evening. We hope to hear inspiring words, amazing stories, and stick around for possible. We have time at the end for questions and answers. Let me take a moment now to do something that is so-so. It's the month of Elul, and in the month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar every single day of the month of Elul. Shofar on Zoom and shofar on Facebook is not the same as it live and in person. Believe me when I tell you, the best thing to do is to get it right there, the full blast, if you will, and to do so, to hear it directly from a shofar and not from your computer's speaker system. But nevertheless, just to remind us all, to get it into our heart and into our soul that it is the month of Elul and that Rosh Hashanah is coming, let me take a minute now to blow the shofar. Shana Tova, may it be a good year and a sweet year for all of us, certainly better than this past year, at least on the secular calendar. So let's jump right in right now. I'd like to welcome Rabbi Chaim Bruk. Rabbi Chaim Bruk is here with us all the way from Big Sky country, Big Sky, Montana. Is Big Sky a city or a town, or is it the whole state? We'll find out in a minute.
The state of mind.
It's a state of, absolutely. So we thank you for being with us. We look forward to it. I must say that Rabbi Bruk, his mother is my mother's cousin. His wife is my daughter's cousin. So if you saw that very cute picture of the family with all those adorable children, we're cousins from every which way. So welcome to our home, welcome to our family, welcome to our community. Rabbi Bruk, who likes to say he lives in Montana. He's, of course, the co-director with his wife of Chabad of Montana, Chabad Lubavitch of Montana, the father of 5 adopted lovely children, a lover of Torah and sushi, and, of course, the Torah and the great outdoors. You'd have to if you live in Montana. Go.
Okay. So you forgot to mention as well that it's Mrs. Posner's. My mother was Mrs. Posner's first cousin as well, not just your mother's. And that's actually probably the reason I'm on the call tonight. Mrs. Posner called me a few months ago, and here we are. So it's nice to be from Montana when you're talking to people from Alabama, because for years you guys probably got the people in Chabad would say, we even have couples living in Alabama. And then we took over when we moved to Montana, and suddenly Montana became the far out place that Chabad has dispatched its ambassadors of light. But I'd like to begin, with something that I'm not going to address right in the beginning, but I'd like to plant a seed in your mind, and we'll see where that takes us. So you saw the picture on the screen before, and I'm going to ask a question that I want you to think about throughout our talk tonight, and that is it really that novel? When you see that picture with a diverse family with 5 adopted children, for a Chabad Chassid, for someone that is a disciple of the Rebbe of blessed memory, for a couple that has devoted their life to Judaism in Big Sky Country and what we like to call here in Montana the last best place, is it really such a novel concept that we would take in children, adopt them as our own, and create this unconventional family? So I will answer that question towards the end of our talk, but I'd like you to think about that and ponder whether it's really such a big deal as people would like to make it out to be. So how does a kid from Brooklyn, Chaim Bruk, end up in Bozeman, Montana? In the summer of 2004, I and a fellow yeshiva student, rabbinical student, who spent the summer traversing the great state of Montana, all the way from the eastern plains of Montana. Montana is a big state. It's about 17 times the state of Israel. It's also the size, if you want to know the most accurate description, it's the size of Germany. So geographically, it's a very, very large place with about 1 million citizens in the entire state. And at the time, we believed a few hundred Jews. Obviously, living here now for a long time, we believe there's a few thousand, not a few hundred. But I land in Billings, Montana with my yeshiva friend, and we begin a journey that starts in Miles City all the way to Eureka, the British Columbia border in the northwest corner of the state. We go from town to town, from city to city, finding 1 or 2 Jews, putting up mezuzahs, tefillin, Shabbos candles, doing the beautiful, incredible work that we were inspired to do by the Rebbe, bringing authentic Judaism to Montana, a place that hadn't had an Orthodox shul, hadn't had an Orthodox or traditional Jewish experience in over 150 years. And it was an incredible summer. And so when Pesach came around 6 months later, we sent matzah to every Jewish home that we knew in the state, and the response to it was overwhelming. And so in 2005, I came back with another yeshiva student and spent another month visiting with Jews of Montana. And the truth is, if you come to Montana in the summer, talk about the winters are different, later tonight, but if you come to Montana in the summer, you automatically fall in love with the place. It's an incredible place to be. I mean, we're surrounded by the Northern Rockies. You have Yellowstone National Park, you have Glacier National Park, you have the Big Sky Resort. It's just an incredible place, following in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark on their expeditions literally throughout the state. And so the second summer of 2005, which actually I believe that was the summer that you guys in the South were dealing with Hurricane Katrina. I was spending the summer in Montana, had a wonderful time visiting with Jews here. And that Hanukkah of 2005, December of 2005, I did something which tends to be my modus operandi. I don't do things in the conventional form. I couldn't find any yeshiva students to come with me to Montana for Hanukkah. So I called my sister Rachel in New York. I said, Rachel, what are you doing for winter break? She said, nothing. I said, good, you're coming with me to Montana. We were the first brother and sister to travel on Merkah Shluchos together, on Chabad outreach work together as siblings. And we had 4 Hanukkah parties throughout the state of Montana: Billings, Bozeman, Missoula, and Helena. And 2 weeks later, I met Chavi for the first time. My wife Chavi, who's the daughter of the Chabad Shluchim, the Rebbe Shluchim in San Antonio. March 22nd of 2006, we were married. And exactly a year later, the morning after our first anniversary, we landed in Bozeman, Montana to open the state's first Chabad center. Today, we have 3 Chabad centers, 1 in Bozeman. We opened up a second branch near the University of Montana in Missoula. And a year and a half ago, Chavi's sister and her husband opened the 3rd branch near Glacier National Park. For those that are familiar with Montana, up in the Flathead Valley, gorgeous, gorgeous places to run Chabad centers. And why? Why are we schlepping around in a place like Montana, going from to cities that have population of 200 to get a mezuzah on a door? What guides a young couple to do that? And by the way, the answer to my question is not just about what guides us here in Montana. It's the answer to every other Chabad couple around the world, including in Alabama. And that is a core teaching, an invaluable core teaching that we are all taught growing up. It's based on biblical ideas, but it's really elucidated in the teachings of Hasidus and the philosophy that it's our bread and butter. And that is, there's a difference in Judaism between kamus and echus, a quantitative experience and a qualitative experience. And so often in Judaism, or what people like to call organized religion, we get very caught up with quantity. It's all about the numbers. How many people were in Shul Rosh Hashanah? How many came to the Hanukkah party? How many Jews are you? How many are on your mailing list? And the Rebbe taught us, and Judaism teaches us, that it's about the quality. It's about the individual enjoying an incredible experience with God, with their fellow Jews, with fellow human beings that are our assets to humanity, our assets to the world. And that qualitative experience is unbeatable. There's nothing that can compare to that. And when you live in a place like Montana, if you have a quantitative mind, if it's all about the numbers, then we would give up a long time ago. My guess is you'd probably give up in Alabama too. But because we were ingrained with this incredible way of seeing the world, that it's all about the individual experience, you could live happily, productively, meaningfully in a place like Montana, because it's not about the numbers, it's about each individual experience. And those we have many of. You know, the prophet Isaiah tells us that when Mashiach comes, when the Jewish people are finally redeemed and brought back to the land of Israel as a wholesome entity, that that God will single-handedly find every Jew that may be exiled in Saskatchewan, in Northwest Territories, even in Montana, and bring them to the land of Israel. And we get to live that embodiment every single day. Taking one Jew at last night, Shabbos ended in Bozeman, literally. This is not on my script because it happened last night. At 8:53, Shabbos ended. We had a big wedding here last week for a family. And last night at 9:17, 25 minutes, 30 minutes after Shabbos, my phone rings from a woman that lives in Great Falls. It's 3 hours north of Bozeman. She says, Rabbi, my daughter's about to be evicted. And she knows that we have something called Project Dignity, where we help families that are in need. And she needs me to help cover the rent so her daughter isn't evicted. Had we not been in Bozeman, would she not have my number on speed dial? She has absolutely no one else to turn to. So when I look at that phone call, I don't look at it as a burden. Of course, I have to scramble and figure out how I'm going to get the money to help her, but that's not the point. The point is that the Rebbe had this vision, the Rebbe living in Brooklyn. And if I may say so myself, as a Brooklyn boy in a pretty decrepit neighborhood in Brooklyn, out of this decrepit neighborhood, he created a beacon of light. He created an ambassadorship program that transforms the world, not just spiritually, just being there for our brethren, for our brothers and sisters on an individual experience. In 2015, I was traveling to Washington, D.C. for some meetings, and I landed in Minneapolis, and I'd like to think that I'm a popular guy, but when you land in Minneapolis after a 2-hour flight and you have about 19 missed calls and voicemails, you know something's wrong. Either, telemarketers in Pakistan got my number, or something really unhealthy is going on. So I start listening to the voicemails, and as I'm listening, the phone call comes in. So I pick up the phone. It's the rabbi from El Al in Israel. Emergency. An El Al plane landed in Billings, Montana with 316 passengers aboard. They made an emergency landing. They must have kosher food immediately. So I calmed this Israeli dude down a little bit. You know, my father's an Israeli, so I have a little bit of experience on how to deal with that special, unique breed that comes out of Israel. And I said, listen here, the plane didn't land in Chicago. It didn't land in New York. It landed in Billings, Montana. So calm down, and we'll do the best we can under the circumstances. And I'm not even in town. What happened was, as they crossed over after 14 hours of flying from Tel Aviv to LA, they crossed over the Canadian airspace into Montana, and a check engine light went on, and they landed there. There's no customs agents in Billings, Montana. They couldn't let these people into the country, so they gave them a room, locked them up in a room. Just imagine 316 Israelis. The Billings airport is the size of my living room, so it wasn't like they had a lot of space to hang out. So I called Chavi in Bozeman. She was home with 3 little kids. It was 8 o'clock Sunday morning. I said, Chav, you won't believe it. There's an El Al plane in Billings. Now, that's something you don't hear. I imagine it happened in Alabama. Someone said there was an El Al plane in Alabama. You'd all look the same way. So I said, what do you think? She goes, well, what's the question? I got to load up the car, and we got to go to Billings. I said, you got the 3 kids. It's Sunday morning. She says, what do you mean? They're hungry. They're hungry. Of course they're hungry, because Jews, you imagine 14 hours on the plane, they probably didn't eat anything. So when they landed in Billings, they were starving. So Javi loaded up the minivan, the whole back of the minivan with rugelach and cold cuts and whatever we had in the freezers, we loaded up. She stopped at Walmart, picked up bagels and lox. We have Pas Yisrael bagels. And she came to Billings. When she came through the security checkpoint, she was welcomed with a round of applause like you'd think Queen Esther from the story of Purim showed up. And I wondered at the time, it couldn't just be about the food and the response we got from all over the world, people sending donations to Chabad Montana and sending emails and at the time, WhatsApp. And I realized it had nothing to do with the food. Jews were stranded on an island. The island at that point happened to be called Billings, Montana. For most of the Jews on the plane, they never even heard of the place. And they were sure there couldn't be anything there to create that homey environment that a Jew likes to always have, that Hamish environment where you feel like you're not alone. And when Chavi walked through the security checkpoint with 3 of her kids, and she's a local, she's a Montanan, it changed their whole atmosphere. And even though they were stuck there for quite a bit of time, it changed their whole approach to it, and they were able to feel like we're part of a family, even when you're in Billings, Montana. And the truth is that we see that almost every day. When I got a call from a woman from Los Angeles, Terry, and she called me in 2011, 12, something like that. She said, Rabbi, my son is at a youth treatment program up in the West, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. We have a lot of youth treatment programs for teenagers who had various struggles, anywhere from drugs to rebelliousness. I mean, all different types of challenges, attempted suicide. So there's a youth treatment center in Helena, Montana, and her son was there, Michael, and she called me crying that in 2 months he's supposed to have his big bar mitzvah they've been planning for a long time in LA, the ritzy glitzy Los Angeles bar mitzvahs, and she's devastated. All the family's supposed to fly in, and here I'm this young, I don't know, I was here for maybe 3 years. I said, I don't understand the problem, Terry. Why don't you tell all your relatives to fly to Helena? We'll make the bar mitzvah in Helena. We'll rent there's no ballrooms. We'll rent a conference room at a hotel. We'll bring a Torah on Rosh Chodesh. We'll make a kosher breakfast, and we'll celebrate his bar mitzvah in Helena. I'm sure the school will approve. She goes, really? We can do that? It was like totally out of her. She never even dreamt that it could be done. And lo and behold, 2 months later, at the Red Lion Inn in Helena, Montana, we're sitting there on a Sunday morning. Now, if you look at me, pretty sure it's evident that I'm not the first candidate that would enter like Dancing with the Stars. It's just not my thing. Exercise, it's something I think about all the time, something I don't get to do very often. That morning in Helena, when I was celebrating Michael's bar mitzvah, I felt like I belonged on Dancing with the Stars. There was such a deep joy in the room watching this boy with all his family from Chicago and Philly and LA. They all flew to Helena. And they were able to celebrate his bar mitzvah despite the challenging circumstance that he found himself in, because it's all about those individual moments. This is what we live for, to give every Jewish child, boy and girl, the opportunity to experience the authenticity and joy that really comes from every facet of Judaism. I mean, as much as it is on the exciting part of life, in 2008, we were young, Javi and I were here for a year, no kids. We'll talk about the whole kid dynamic a little later in my talk, sitting at the Lindley Park, a local park, having lunch. And here's a good rule for rabbis and probably for most men: don't answer your cell phone. If you're having lunch with your wife, it's probably not a good thing to answer your phone. But I wasn't so smart then, and so I answered my phone. There's a guy named David. He said, Rabbi, my dad, Zali, he's in very bad shape. He had an aneurysm. And when he passes, we want you to do the funeral. Now, in Montana, when they say they want you to do the funeral, there's no Chever Kadisha, there's no Holy Burial Society here. I had never trained in yeshiva to be a member of the Chever Kadisha, to prepare bodies for burial. It wasn't my cup of tea. I knew it would come one day, I just didn't realize it would come that quick. So I think subconsciously, I really didn't want to do it. So I said to David, I said, if I do this funeral, it's going to be done like super duper Orthodox. What the New York Times would call fundamentalist super duper Orthodox. I'm going to do everything proper. It means you're going to have to rip your clothing, not a little black ribbon. It's going to be the real deal. I was hoping, I think subconsciously, that he would say, forget it. Except it didn't work. He said, Rabbi, whatever you want. Daddy loves you. And so whatever you want to do, you do. So the next 36 hours, I was on the phone training with rabbis who had been in Chever Kadisha for decades, learning the ins and outs and the ropes. And Thursday morning, this was on Tuesday, Thursday morning, I got the call, 4 a.m. that he had passed. I got in my car, drove 3 hours north to Great Falls where he lived. And you know how rabbis show up at funerals? In Yiddish, we say they look all geputzt. They're going to, a lot of people at funerals, they're going to give a knock it out of the park, a eulogy that's going to make, everyone's going to be talking about it. When I showed up at Zali's funeral, I think it was hard for most people to detect if I was the deceased or the rabbi officiating, because I had spent 3 hours in the funeral home preparing Zali's body for burial, to give him a proper Jewish burial, with everything that entails. But at the end of the day, when I drove home that afternoon from Great Falls back to Bozeman, a 3-hour drive, I was the happiest camper you could think of, because I knew Zali. Zali was not a very religious man, to say the least. He never let me put on tefillin with him. He did allow me to put a mezuzah on his door, and he loved when I talked to him about the difference of kasha and potato knishes. That was his favorite conversation. But he wasn't very religious. But the fact that he was able to be buried 100% according to the Jewish tradition, because his kids knew that he has a relationship with the rabbi, and that's all that matters, that to me was the most rewarding thing a rabbi and a rebbitzin living in a remote place like Montana could ever wish for. I'm a Brooklyn boy, and that comes with, Mrs. Posner, Rebbitzin Posner knows this because she knew my mother. my mother and my father both had very, very sharp mouths. My father still does. They didn't play around. They told you exactly what they think, exactly how they felt, and sometimes you liked what they said, and sometimes you didn't. That came from my grandmother, who was the same exact way. I'm always blessed that I was one of my grandmother's favorite grandchildren, so I didn't get all the love she gave some of the other grandchildren. So when you have chutzpah, you have to be careful, because chutzpah can go sometimes overboard. And when you're a rabbi and you're in a position of leadership and you're in a tough situation, you got to pray that the right words come out of your mouth, because it either can go really, really well, or it can go really, really not so well. And so in 2012, I got a call from a woman, Ramona. She said, Rabbi Sheldon, her husband, who had come to shul one time on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, he was in shul for 15 minutes. That was my only interaction with him. She wasn't Jewish. Sheldon was, her husband. And she calls me saying, Rabbi, he drowned on the Boulder River. You know, Montana is the fly fishing capital of America. I don't want to offend anyone's fishing experiences, but Southwest Montana is a fly fishing capital. He was fishing on the Boulder River with his guide. If you know anything about fly fishing, he was standing in the water with his waders, and they had some kind of malfunction, and he and his guide both drowned and passed away. So I was on the phone with her. I was after giving her condolences and comforting her for some time. I said, by the way, Ramona, where is Sheldon's body? So she says, oh, the coroner in Billings took the body. I said, for what? She said, for an autopsy. I said, why? There's no foul play. It was a terrible accident, but why would they do an autopsy? And in Judaism, unless it's a criminal case and it's a real important thing, we don't touch the body. We try to give it an immediate burial without an autopsy. She says, I don't know. You can call the coroner. So I call the coroner, and the coroner picks up the phone, and it's a woman. And I still, to this very day, I don't know where the words came from. I've never said such words before, and I've never said it since. But I said, my name is Rabbi Chaim Bruk from Bozeman, and with the power invested in me by God Almighty, I prohibit you from touching Sheldon's body. And then there was silence. And I thought she's gonna, if I said that to a coroner in New York, I'd probably still be in prison. After about 10 seconds, it was about 10 seconds, it felt like 3 years, but at 10 seconds, she said, with a semi-stutter, she said, Rabbi, what would you like me to do with the body? I said, I'm sending a hearse from Bozeman. I'll be there in 3 hours. Just leave it. We'll take it from here. That was the end of it. Never heard another problem from it. We took care of it. We stopped the autopsy. There was no need for it. And when you live in a place like Montana and you have the authority of coming as a representative of 3,000 years of Judaism, you're able to get away with things like that, right? And they can detect that it comes from a place of authenticity. Just like when I'm being humorous, people can detect, most of the time, they can detect it's coming from a place of humor. When I was at the AIPAC convention in DC with one of my senators, Senator Steve Daines, he's a local, I know him, he lives in Bozeman, and he was walking around telling everyone at AIPAC, this is my Rabbi Chaim Bruk from Bozeman. So after 3 or 4 times, I whispered in his ear, I said, Senator, if you say I'm your rabbi one more time, I'm going to have you circumcised. And he burst out laughing, and all his staff wanted to know, what did you tell him? I said, listen, I'm not repeating what I told him. If he wants to tell you what I told him, that's fine, but I'm not saying another word. And I think when we have the opportunity to live in a place, whether it's Alabama or Montana, the Rebbe taught us that we have the ability to transform people's perspectives and not jump right away to try to find those that hate us or are opposed to us. And I'll explain what I mean. We live in a society today where there are organizations, including Jewish organizations, that live off and they thrive off and they get their oxygen from the fact that there are people that say negative things about Jews, anti-Semites or otherwise. That's what they live for. If the anti-Semites cease to exist, they'd be out of business. They wake up every day, there's a teacher in Ohio that said something insensitive about Jews, so now we got to go attack him on Twitter. And the Rebbe's approach was, why attack him? There's a principal in Ohio or a school teacher in Montana that said something insensitive about Jews. This is an incredible opportunity. Let's send the rabbi or rebbitzin to go sit down with them, have a cup of coffee, enlighten them, educate them, uplift them. Don't label them an anti-Semite because most of them aren't. They're ignorant. And when you deal with ignorant, right, in Montana, we're talking about 996,000 residents of Montana that aren't Jewish. So if we have 4,000 Jews and there's 1 million people, the vast majority aren't Jewish. You think they're all anti-Semites? They never met a Jew before. They don't know much about Jews. It's an opportunity for us to educate and enlighten. When I see someone in the grocery looking at me, they have that look and, they're about to whisper to their wife, to look at the guy in aisle 6. Instead of waiting for them to say something negative, I walk straight up to them. Right? I'm wearing my yarmulke, my tzitzis, I always do. I walk straight up to them. I say, hey, you look a little confused. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Chaim. I'm a Jewish person. It's incredible to watch how the situation is immediately diffused when you do that. Why? Because now they're in a semi-uncomfortable situation, and you identified yourself. I once did that to a guy in a gas station in Helena, Montana, and guess what he did? He looked at me and he said, wow. When I told him I was Jewish, he said, wow, I've never met one of your kind before. I'm like, what? And I really felt good leaving the gas station because now he can say he met a Jew once upon a time. And so we as a community, as a Jewish community, both Chabad and non-Chabad, it's not relevant. We have to learn to stop looking for enemies and start looking for people that we can enlighten and uplift and inspire. Because the vast majority of people in our world are not out to get anyone. They're simply ignorant when it comes to one issue or another, and it's our opportunity to really transform the way they see things. And of course, my primary role is to deal with Jews, but the Rebbe believed that if you have a couple that's living in a place like Montana, it's not just for the Jews, it's for everyone. I remember I'm a descendant from my maternal grandfather, was a descendant of the Ger Hasidim. Just like there's Chabad Hasidim, there's other groups of Hasidim. One of them is called Ger, they're Polish Hasidim, originated in Poland. And one of the Ger Rebbes asked him, I know we're coming to Rosh Hashanah, as Rabbi Friedman said, but he asked a question about Hanukkah. He said, when it comes to the story of Hanukkah, it says that the Talmud says, why do we celebrate Hanukkah? Because when the Greeks and the Maccabees fought, they were looking, after the war was over, they were looking for pure oil, and the Greeks had, they broke open all the oil jugs, and so they found one jug of oil that was enough to last one night. It lasted 8 nights. They had defiled all the oil. So the Ger Rebbe asked the question. He said, I don't understand, what's the big deal? So what? The Greeks forgot one jug of oil. That's such a big miracle. They tried. They wanted to defile it all, but they forgot one. Right? I'm a rabbi. I go to the grocery a lot. I come home from the grocery and I'm unpacking the bags, and I could swear that I bought those 2 cans of tomato sauce and they're nowhere to be found. I remember paying for them. They're gone. The next day, I'm driving like a New Yorker. I make a short stop, and suddenly 2 cans of tomato sauce roll out from under one of the seats. Is that a miracle? We're going to make a whole yontif over it? Make a whole holiday? Okay, you forgot one. So the Ger Rebbe said something that from the day I heard it about 15 years ago, it's almost been my motto for Chabad of Montana. He said the miracle wasn't that they found the oil. The miracle was that despite the fact that they had a 3-year war with many casualties and maimed soldiers of the Maccabees, that they searched for the oil. After a 3-year war, you'd think, what would we do after a 3-year battle? Take a break. Go to the Bermuda. Go to the Bahamas. You didn't have oil in your temple for 3 years, so you won't have oil for another week. In a week, there'll be fresh, new oil. You'll light your menorah. You'll light the menorah until that's not what they did. The minute the war was over, they started searching for oil. They never lost their resolve in wanting to find the purity and the holiness and the morality that exists within Judaism. And they searched for it. What I tell people is that the fact that we find Jews in Montana in the most forsaken places that are excited to put up a mezuzah, that's not a miracle. They're Jewish. Of course they want to put up a mezuzah. Of course they want to light Shabbos candles. They're the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Of course they want to be connected to their heritage. The miracle is that there was a Rebbe that encouraged and inspired young couples to search for the Jews of Montana, to search for the Jews of Wyoming and South Dakota, and never for the Jew. I remember a Jewish mother calling me from Westchester County in New York, from a very prominent Jewish family, that her daughter had gone to Montana, married a non-Jew, and she's pregnant. And what's going to be with the bris? And she literally burst out crying. I let her cry. I said, I understand the problem. Let me know when she has the baby, and we'll make sure on the 8th day there'll be a moil and a minyan and a bris. And it's exactly what happened. She lived 6 hours away from where I live. The morning of the bris, the moil flew in. I flew him in from Vancouver, British Columbia, and I drove 6 hours up. I called the local minyan together. The mother, she till to this very day, we're talking about 11 or 12 years later, she is so grateful for the fact that her grandchild was able to have a bris right here in Big Sky Country. And so those are experiences that are truly, you can't really put there's no number, there's no quantity, there's no financial value that you could put to those incredible moments that exist when the USY, from the United Synagogue Youth, which I never heard of growing up in Crown Heights, I knew the yeshivas I went to, I never heard of the USY, and one day FedEx calls us. The only thing I regret about this is that it was 2008, And I was very naive. I was a young rabbi, and I didn't know enough about finances, especially of big corporations. So I get a call from Federal Express in Memphis, Tennessee, FedEx, that there's a Jewish camp in Yellowstone National Park, and FedEx was supposed to deliver dinner to them. This is 11 a.m. They want to know if we can provide dinner at 6 p.m. for 63 Jewish kids in the park. So I look at Chavi. I said, we can make a killing, right? 63 kids, it's FedEx. So I said to FedEx, for $1,300, we can get it done. Why do I regret it? Because if I knew then what I knew now, I would have added a few zeros to FedEx. It wouldn't even make a difference. They needed to get the dinner to the people in the park. But 7 hours later, they picked up an entire massive dinner for 63 Jewish kids. Now, we had no idea who these kids were. We knew there were Jewish kids that needed food, and we got to get it to them. 2 weeks later, we got a thank you card in the mail, and it turns out that the camp was USY from the conservative movement, and they were so grateful. And I said to Chavi, this is incredible, because let's say even 5% of those kids on the bus will remember for the rest of their life that while stuck in Yellowstone without food, Chabad showed up to bring it to them. It will remind them not that Chabad is great. We don't need anyone to help us. Chabad is, we're the best marketing people in the world. Everyone knows that we're fantastic. That's not what it was about. They'll remember that Jews are there for each other no matter what our labels are. We are a family. And when it comes to family, the sky is the limit on what we are ready to do for each other. But like I said earlier, my motto for our Chabad house, for my life, my personal life and my communal life, is that you gotta have fun. No matter what you're dealt in life, you gotta have fun. Every one of us has challenges in our life. Some obviously more than others, but we all have those moments where we think we're gonna break. This is gonna break us. And no matter what we're going through, we need to remember that we need to enjoy the moments that God, to cherish and enjoy the moments of life that Hashem gives us. And so our motto is that if we're not having fun, we're closing up shop. The day I stop having fun in Montana is the day I close up. I move to Alabama, I move somewhere else. I ain't staying in Montana if I'm not having fun. So I try very hard to always find humor and fun in everything. So it was a gift to me that in 2008, when I walked into the state capitol for our menorah lighting with then Democrat Governor Brian Schweitzer, a fantastic guy who I considered a dear friend, I walk into the capitol, and one of the Jews from Helena, Montana says to me, Rabbi, do you speak Hebrew? Now, if I was in New York, I'd probably be offended by the question, but I said, sure, I speak Hebrew. He says, listen, there's an officer downstairs that's looking to speak to someone that knows Hebrew. So I said, no problem. I had time until the menorah lighting. So I went downstairs, and there was a Sergeant Fasket, a white, Caucasian, Christian, like the rest of Montana, sergeant in the Helena Police Department, who was charged with being on the governor's protective service. You know, he was protecting our governor. So I said, what can I do for you, Sergeant? He says, 6 months ago, we adopted a bomb-sniffing dog, German Shepherd, for the governor's security team. When we adopted the dog, we didn't realize that the dog was trained in Israel. And all the commands that the dog was taught were in Hebrew. So he hands me a piece of paper that they gave him, which has the transliterated commands. He says, but every time we 6 months, we've been talking to this dog, it doesn't listen to a word we say. So I'm hoping maybe you could teach me how to pronounce these words. I look at the paper, it had maybe 12 commands on it. Shev, sit down, amod, stand up. I mean, it was really basic stuff. I spent maybe 12 minutes with the guy. And here's another lesson you learn about America. You could put on tefillin with 1,000 Jewish men. You can get 5,000 Jewish women to light Shabbos camels. The New York Times could care less. But if you talk to a dog in Hebrew for 10 minutes, it's an amazing thing for American news cycle. Because what happened next threw me totally off guard. There's a guy working upstairs for the governor at the time. His name was Eric Stern. He's still a good friend. He's the son of David Stern, the commissioner of the NBA, who just passed away a few months ago. So Eric thought it was hilarious that there's a rabbi speaking to a sergeant with a dog in Hebrew. So he writes an op-ed for the New York Times. The Times had enough news that week. They weren't interested. They didn't print it. A year later, December of 2009, by the way, you can Google this later. Type in dog Hebrew Montana and you'll be fascinated what will come up. But a year later, in December of 2009, the New York Times prints the article. The headline of the article is, yes, Mikey, there are Jewish rabbis in Montana. Mikey's the name of the dog. And I want to just read to you the last 2 paragraphs of the article. You can read the entire article later. It was the #1 shared article on the New York Times page for 3 days. So you can imagine how many emails I got from people all over the world. Are you the rabbi from the dog? Are you the rabbi from the dog? And I'm like, I understand. I moved here to deal with Jews, and here I became a rabbi of a dog or a German shepherd. So this is what the last two paragraphs said. So all is well in the Jewish community here because the Hasidic rabbi is helping the Montana cop speak Hebrew to his dog. It is good news all around. The officer keeps the capital safe, and the Hebrew pooch is feeling more at home, hearing his native tongue. But the big winner is the rabbi, a recent arrival from Brooklyn, who is working hard against tough odds to bring his Lubavitch movement to Montana. He's been scouring the state for anyone who can speak Hebrew and is elated to have found a German shepherd he can talk to. That was how the article concluded, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because you remember in 2009 when that article was printed, Javi and I were still traveling every month, 7 hours each way to Salt Lake City to the closest mikveh. We did that for 19 months, traveled every month to Utah, and Montana has 9 months of winter. It snows from Yom Kippur until Shavuos, guaranteed. Last year it was even from Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, Shabbat Slichot, it was already snowing. So driving in the winters to Utah is a very big deal, very slick and snowy and blizzardy roads. So here we are schlepping to Utah. Here we are trying to bring Yiddishkeit, and Hashem gives us this incredible story in the New York Times that, sure, it was a funny, humorous article, but it created this awareness that we exist in Montana. So many Jews in Montana who hadn't heard about us suddenly were acquainted with the fact that right here in their backyard, there happens to be a couple doing this kind of work. And it also made us, pretty... I see someone just shared the article in the chat. You can check it out later. So it really created a vibe and an awareness of our existence so that when we came to people to do all the mitzvahs that we love doing with people, we weren't foreigners. We were the guys, we were the couple from the New York Times. Another thing that is incredible about living in Montana is that because of Yellowstone, we have hundreds and hundreds of Orthodox Jews who come to our Chabad house every Shabbos in the summer. And average, except for this year due to COVID, we shut it down to outsiders. But generally in the summer, we have about 20 to 30 visitors from all over the world, Orthodox Jews who come to spend Shabbos with us. They eat all the meals with us. They meet our locals who are mostly what we like to call Jews on a journey, but from a very secular background. And they spend Shabbos together. And the Orthodox Jews figure out that they don't have to be so judgmental about the more secular Jews. The secular Jews figure out that the Orthodox Jews are not anything that's being the way they're nothing like it's portrayed in the media, and they spend such quality time together that it creates long-term relationships between local Jews in Bozeman and Jews in Muncie and Five Towns and Los Angeles and Chicago. That I actually take great pride in that kind of in breaking that divide, because so often as Jews we get caught up in the divide. I'm guessing Birmingham and Alabama is no different than any other Jewish community. With our people I associate with this group and not with that group and that group and not with this group. It's a typical Jewish community. But the Rebbe believed, as we do, authentically, that we are all a family. And if we're all a family, it doesn't matter where you pray, it doesn't matter where you associate, we still need to treat each other with utmost respect and dignity. And that's not just to the fellow Jews, it's to all human beings. It's one of the most incredible things we get to do when my kids interact in local schools that aren't necessarily Jewish schools. They get the number one lesson I try to convey to them, and Chavi tries to convey to them, is the idea that despite our differences, despite the fact that we represent something so different, something so unbeatable, there's nothing like it. Torah and mitzvahs is the greatest thing the world has ever been gifted, and it was gifted to us at Sinai. Despite that, or perhaps because of that, we are uniquely positioned to show the world how we can treat every individual with utmost respect and utmost dignity, because they are too created in the image of God. And if we focus on that more, especially in a world like today where there's so much ideological divide, people talk, you mention a political world and people literally go bananas. Now, one option is not to talk politics. Come to our show, you'll never hear it. Not because I'm politically illiterate. I'm actually quite literate, and Alabama is always a great place for us to have great conversations about who's running for office in Alabama. It's way more entertaining about the guys running for office in Alabama than running in Montana. But that should never be a reason to divide people. We are human beings, all devoted to the same thing, creating a better world. And that is something that's ingrained in our minds and hearts, and should be ingrained in everyone's minds and hearts. And so that brings me to my family story. Right, I know my colleagues in the Chabad community take great pride, and perhaps rightfully so. I'm not the judge, I'm very I'm biased, I'm very subjective here, but they take great pride in our family story. A young couple, I was 26, Chavi 23, diagnosed with infertility. A year and a half later, we adopt our first child who just turned 11 on Friday. Then we adopt less than a year later, a second child who turns out has severe special needs that we did not know about when we adopted her. By the way, we met her for the first time at Enterprise Rent-A-Car in Newark Airport, because that's where my brother and sister picked her up from the agency. They got there before us. So we met her at how many people could say they met their kid in Newark Airport for the first time? And so then 3 years later, when we got an opportunity to adopt a biracial, a black child, we said yes, and we adopted a black son. 3 years after that, we had a 12-year-old who came to our summer camp from Cody, Wyoming, and came from a pretty challenging home and wanted to stay with us, and we adopted a 12-year-old, which is something we didn't do before. We adopted 3 children from birth, but not a 12-year-old, which is also, you have to have a lot of fun with that too. You know, when I have the Orthodox visitors in town, it's a lot of fun because they're sitting around the Shabbos table, and they're from Muncie or Lakewood or Five Towns or Crown Heights, and I say, this is my daughter Shoshana. When she was now she's 16, but I would say she's 15 years old. And then 5 minutes later, I'd say, Chavi and I have been married for 13 and a half years. Now, if you're an Orthodox person, you're married 13 and a half years, and he has a 15-year-old daughter, who their mind starts racing. And then I look at them sometimes, and I go, you know, things happen. And they go out of their mind. And then, 10 minutes later, I say, by the way, all our 5 children are adopted, and you could see they're like, oh, God, thank God, this rabbi. You could see they don't say anything because they're eating at my Shabbos table. They have to be careful. I'm the host. But you could tell that their blood pressure drops. But you have to be able to have fun with it. Because if everything is just so rigid and so complicated, and if someone says the wrong word, you get so bent out of shape. It's okay. People tell me all the time things that are inappropriate, meaning they didn't mean to. They're not saying it from a negative perspective. They don't know. Someone will say to me, Chaim, may God bless you to have your own children. Look at them. Are you kidding me? I got 5 of my own children. They keep me very, very busy. They didn't mean it that way. I knew what they meant. They meant God bless me to have biological children. So I have 2 options. I can either get all bent out of shape or recognize that, cut them some slack. Wouldn't you want someone to cut you slack if you said something that you didn't mean to be negative, but just came out that way? And a year after we adopted Shoshana, we merited to adopt we have 4 girls and a boy. So we adopted our baby who just turned 3 weeks ago. And she has to me, it's a great honor. She's named for my mother, Chanaleah. All of my siblings, my 4 siblings, and I all have children named for her. And I was a little concerned because when it comes to adoption, you really have no say. Meaning if the call doesn't come that there's a baby available for adoption, it may never come. But Hashem sent this little baby to us. And the next morning after she was born, we named her at the Torah, Chanaleah, for my mother. And she carries the name of a great woman who and this I am biased and I am subjective, but I believe my mother was an incredible lady. I think that a lot of the traits that I'm gifted with, the negatives I blame on my father, the positives I blame on my mother. It's a fantastic way. That's why God gave us 2 parents. You can pick who to blame what on. But she carries my mother's name, and that's, we have these 5 children. And I ask you, hearing everything about our life, forget about the children for a moment, hearing about our life in Montana and the way Chavi and I and all my colleagues around the world deal with fellow Jews, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning in a hospital, 4 o'clock in the morning in a morgue, or a bar mitzvah on a Sunday and a bris on Tuesday, and running to here and coming from there and helping the old lady and helping the children with Hebrew school. It's the same devotion. Is it novel? Sure. My personal family journey is novel because everyone's family journey is novel. There aren't 2 families on the earth that have a similar journey. Everyone has their own journey. Every one of us had certain ambitions and ideas that we thought our family would turn out, and it didn't turn out that way. It did turn out that way, but everyone has a unique journey. The fact that we ended up with the family that we did is because the same Rebbe that guided us all to have a love for humanity that's unbeatable guided us to create a family with that same love. Sometimes having adoptive children, you need more love because there isn't the natural genetic connection. And I'd like to think that I love my children more than anything in the world. But it comes from the same source of a recognition that every human being is a very special gift from Hashem, right? And I'll conclude with this before I take your questions, if there are any questions. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, came to be. In other words, he came in an era that the Jewish people were totally demoralized. You had, on the one hand, you had the sadly not so famous massacres of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Yimach Shemoy, may his name be erased. He was a Greek Orthodox Cossack in Ukraine in the mid-1600s who decimated 300 Jewish communities and killed anywhere between 200 and 300,000 Jews. The reason we don't hear so much about him is, of course, because the Holocaust happened after, so we got stuck with that. But it was a terrible era for the Jews of Poland and Ukraine. And then a few years later, the Jewish people suffered a spiritual demise with the existence of Shabtai Tzvi, who was a false Messiah. He was a rabbi who claimed to be the Messiah. Tens of thousands of Jews followed him. And it turned out that not only was he false, but he was an apostate, because eventually when he was under fire from the Turkish Sultan, he converted to Islam. And when he converted to Islam, he created, everyone that followed him fell apart. And it was a great demoralized time for the Jewish people. Along comes the Baal Shem Tov of Israel, Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, and taught three incredible principles that guide us in the Hasidic movement till this very moment. Number one, that everything that happens in the world is ordained by God, is divinely ordained. There's no coincidences. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. And because of that, the second principle that he taught was just as valuable, which is that not only when we serve God, when we pray, when we study Torah, and we do mitzvahs, but anything we do in life needs to be done with joy and zest and excitement. Right? And if you believe everything's ordained by God, everything that's going on in your life, you have no reason not to be happy, because it's exactly the way it should be. Just because you don't think it's the way it should be, that's your problem. God knows exactly what's supposed to happen, which is why it's happening. Plan A was never really just plan. In other words, plan B was always plan A. You just didn't know about it. And now that plan B came to be, now you know that plan A was never a plan altogether. Plan B was always plan A. The third thing he taught was an incredible, at the time, there was a lot of elitism in Judaism. There was a class divide. There was the elitist Jews, the learned Jews, the ones who studied the Talmud and thought they were God's gift to humanity, and they mistreated the simple Jews who were not as learned as they were. They actually, at the time, they had separate synagogues for the learned and the unlearned. If you imagine, today it's honestly hard to believe, but that's what existed in Lithuania and in Latvia and in Poland. Baal Shem Tov said, no more class warfare. We are all children of God, and we all created equally, and all are deserving of dignity and respect. Now you take those three principles together. The idea that everything that God does, everything that happens in our life is ordained by God. The idea that because of that, we can live life joyfully at any given moment. And that the way we look at another human being is with respect and dignity and utmost love. You take those three principles, and then I ask you, is it really so novel that a couple should adopt 5 kids? Or for that matter, that your rabbi or rebbe should show up at the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's not. It should actually be the way all of us operate. Because each of us is meant to be an ambassador of light. It's not a Chabad rabbi and Rebbetzon's job. We're just some of those. It's every one of us has the opportunity at every given moment to be an ambassador of Almighty God, to share that light and that love and that respect and that dignity with every human being we come in contact with. And that's what I leave with you tonight. If there's one thing I could accomplish tonight with all of you, is that tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you see yourself as an ambassador of light, not just as a nice person who goes to Chabad or listens to incredible Zooms, but you are an ambassador of God's light. And tonight we've accomplished something fantastic. And then when COVID is over, and you guys want to escape the humidity and misery of the summers in Alabama, you'll come spend Shabbos with us in Bozeman, and we'll treat you really, really, just write in the memo that you were on the Zoom in Alabama, and we'll treat you extra nice, even nicer than we treat everyone else. And with that, I'm going to give it over to whoever's moderating. And if there's any questions, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll be happy to go have dinner, whichever one comes first.
Thank you. Hey, we're back off on Alabama there. But Yasher Koyach, Rabbi Chaim, thank you. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat. And that's, well, actually, if you're on a phone or if you're on a computer, it's going to be a little bit different. I know that Barry knows how to use the chat. I hope everybody else knows how to use it. If you're on Facebook, you could type it in there. Or if it's easier, just text it to my phone. I could do that as well. Rabbi Bruk, you have already answered my big question of the evening. I really wanted to know how to pronounce Helena. I thought, because we have one in Alabama, and in Alabama it's Helena. So there you go. Problem solved.
I'm going to give the people that call it Helena in Montana, the visitors that call it Helena, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt now. I'll say they must know it's from Alabama. But I get that all the time. By the way, for those that are wondering, Montana is a very libertarian place. If you want to know why people are so nice in Montana, it's because they're libertarian, which means in simple English that they don't care if you're Muslim or Jewish, black or white, Hispanic. It makes no difference. As long as you don't come onto their property without permission. And if you come onto their property without permission, it doesn't matter what color or religion you are, you're going to get shot. That is the general mode of the way we operate, the way Montanans operate. So they're sweethearts, just don't go on their property without permission.
Yeah, that's we in Alabama. We can relate. To that.
Yeah.
So, is there a shliach in Wyoming?
There is. There's one Chabad rabbi in Rebbetzin in Jackson Hole. It's about 3 hours and 45 minutes away from Bozeman. In the summer and the winter, it could take up to 6 hours to get there because of the roads.
All right, so don't do that. We have a friend here who just asked me because his son is in Laramie.
Laramie's far from Jackson Hole, but he should get in touch with Rabbi Mendelson. He does visit Laramie every once in a while. Laramie is a university town.
Oh, okay, nice. So somebody wanted to know if the 16-year-old, she was 12. No, how old was she?
Correct.
Does she get to see her family? She was older when you adopted her. What's her connection to her old family?
Very limited. We never, in our experience, we don't take away our children's ability, especially older ones, from having a relationship or knowledge about their biological background. We believe it's unhealthy, and I believe most therapists and psychologists believe it's unhealthy to try to suppress a child from asking questions about their history because it's part of their experience, it's part of their story. So she has the ability to contact them whenever she'd like, and whether she does that or not is up to her. And we obviously don't push her to do that. She made a very extreme. There was an extreme transition for a good reason, but she has the ability whenever she wants.
So while I'm waiting for some of the people to finish typing, do you spend most of your time, do you think 50-50? What is it? Jewish people who are residents of Montana, or mostly tourists, passersby, or I don't know, do you call them
I would probably, if I looked at the year as a whole, I probably spend 80% of my time with locals and about 20% with people visiting. It's not just visiting. We have visitors, which is one category. We also have a big chunk of second homeowners who live on either East or West Coast, and they have a beautiful second homes here. And so I would say maybe 20% of my time is with people that are some level of temporary. 80% is local, and the local community keeps growing. And that's primarily because people are sick and tired of the taxes, pollution, and traffic in the big cities. So they come here to bring traffic, pollution, and all the other gifts from the big cities.
Right. Well, we here in Alabama, we think of, we're surprised to find out that there are Jews in Connecticut. Montana, we know.
There's a question that came in on the chat. It asked if I have any connection with the Aryan organizations. I do not. There's very, very little anti-Semitic organizations in Montana, and the Montanans really don't tolerate, not white supremacy, not anti-Semitism. It's not welcome in Montana. So does it exist? Sure, it exists everywhere, but it's truly not. There was a story in Billings in 1993 where they tried to make trouble, and they threw a rock into Dr. Schnitzer's home, and the whole town came out with a message, not in our town. In Bozeman in 2007, when we moved there, a guy was trying to run for the school board, and he was associated with the Aryan Nation. They literally booted his tuchus out of our town. They really don't. They do not tolerate white supremacy or anti-Semitism. Does it mean it doesn't exist? No. But like I said, I've been here with the yarmulke and tzitzis for visiting Montana since 2004, and I've yet to run into any anti-Semitic things, and I hope it remains that way. Another
parallel to Alabama, we have the same reputation, if you will. Oh my gosh, you live in Alabama, you must face rednecks and Baruch Hashem, our experience is that, first of all, the rest of the state treats us mostly with great respect. And Halavai, the Jewish community, should do the same. But we really wish we could bottle your energy.
We could do this at 5 a.m. when I start my day. It's way better energy. This is already after a whole day.
And that your message of you got to keep enjoying it is very, very important, not only for shluchim and for Jewish leaders, but for everybody.
I appreciate it. I want to answer Mr. Saul's question on the chat.
Mira, thank you.
When did we choose adoption after we were diagnosed with infertility? The answer is we started looking into it pretty quickly. I mean, I'm talking about, when I say quickly, I mean a few months after we digested the reality that infertility is a fact, and not changing anytime soon. We started dabbling in it, but it's a very complex world. It's not an easy world, adoption. And so as much as we wanted to go that route, we had a lot of challenges, even getting to figure out what are the laws. Every state has different laws. So what are the laws versus this state and that state? It took about 6 months till we were certain that this is the route we're going. And we had a lot of divine intervention where we were truly guided in that direction. But then the problem was, once we decided, we still had nothing, nowhere to turn. There's no Jewish organizations that deal with it. And so we had to really network on our own. And it took about another year. So a year and a half after the diagnosis, we finally adopted our first kid, which in the world of adoption, a year and a half is not so long. But for us, it felt like an eternity. At the moment we had our first baby in our hand, I'll never forget the moment that the adoption agency in New Jersey, I personally, I can only speak for myself, that moment changed everything and I never looked back. Meaning the moment I held my baby in my hand, sure, you never forget that you're experiencing infertility because you don't have biological kids, they don't have your genes, but the anguish of infertility, the constant stabbing at your heart every time you see a baby stroller and you know it's not yours, that dissipated immediately the minute we had our own baby in our hands. So that's just a little insight into it. As a general rule, if you want to hear the whole journey of our adoption, that you got to hire my wife for another talk. She does the whole family journey. And it's an incredible journey, and I highly recommend it, but it's a way above my pay grade. I see another question. How do I get kosher food? Do I buy kosher food in Montana? You can buy all the generic items. You can get mustard and ketchup and Cheerios in Montana. As far as meat and chicken and Chalav Yisrael dairy and bread, we get a truck shipped in from Minneapolis. We have 7 freezers that are loaded at every given time with everything kosher. And when we make our big order, we have about 10 families that order with us. That also, because we make it available, they also order kosher food. And so we buy it in bulk, 2-3 pallets at a time. And we have everything you could dream of right here in Big Sky Country. I just said Big Sky Country to mess with Ray Friedman for a minute there again, just to throw in that term again. Big Sky, beautiful country.
Nice. Twin City Poultry?
Twin City Poultry closed down many, many years ago, in case you don't know.
And guys, Mayor Roberts.
Mayor Roberts is the guy that gets all our kosher food. I believe he's a classmate of yours, no?
That's right.
It's a small world. He's a dear friend. Any questions? Any more questions? Come on, guys.
Did you know, you're from Brooklyn. Did you have any idea how big Montana is?
You want to start with a little more basic question. Did I ever know of Montana before visiting it as a yeshiva student?
So
yeah, we all knew Montana for the same reason, because the Unabomber was arrested outside of Lincoln, Montana. We were very popular. But no, I didn't know much about Montana. Thank God my mother always wanted me to study geography and history and American history, geography, math, English. So in the yeshiva I went to, we never knew anything about Montana, but I knew where Montana was on a map because my mother taught me. But I'd never been to anywhere besides Florida and New York. That was the 2 states, New Jersey. We never really traveled the country. And so my first visit to Montana was a little bit of an eye-opener when you get on the 90 and the speed limit is 80 and you're just in a totally different world. But it's been an incredible, I would never give up Montana. I wouldn't give up Montana for anything. It's an incredible quality of life here. And the people are truly wonderful. And my kids have, we have incredible winter activities with snowing and snowshoeing and snowmobiling and cross-country skiing. And we have wonderful hikes and whitewater rafting and horseback riding and Yellowstone and all the great amenities of the summer. And you adapt pretty quickly because it's easy to adapt to the incredible beauty of nature that exists out here.
And Jan has a follow-up. So it's so wonderful. Does anybody else, any other Brooks coming out to Montana?
No, yeah, not one. They come to visit and they actually enjoy it, but no, they can't. My father goes back and forth saying, oh, I could never live in a place like Montana. I could live in a place, he doesn't know what he wants, but I think if I put a police car outside my house and kept the siren going the whole day, so he felt like he was in Brooklyn, he would be able to live in Montana.
I think I saw a picture. Was he there for the Siyum Sefer Torah?
My whole family was there for the Torah we inaugurated in memory of my mother. That was my mother's yard site. My mother's 10th yard site is coming up in December. So it's been a while, but 9 years ago, we inaugurated a Torah, Hanchi's Torah, and all of my siblings and many relatives came out for that incredible Sunday morning celebration.
Wow, wow, wow. So here in Birmingham, we have a wonderful Jewish day school. Can you give us a short insight as to how your kids get a Jewish education?
Not as easy as a Jewish day school. My kids all attend local schools, none of which are Jewish. That's where they get their secular education. And then we have to supplement. So my one daughter, for example, and we deal with each kid individually. Just like we deal in the Chabadas with every family individually, we deal with each of our children with their needs based on their needs. And so my daughter Chaya gets up, she starts her day, her class starts at 6:45 in the morning. She joins a Chabad online school from 6:45 till 10 a.m. Montana time. And at 10 a.m. she joins a local school for her secular studies. Zizi and many have a private online tutor who teaches them Hebrew online, but that's after school 3 days a week, but they go to local schools throughout the day. Shoshana, 16, just came home after 2 years going to a special therapeutic school in Utah. She just got home 2 weeks ago, and she's going to a expedition field school here in Bozeman, which is science-oriented, where they go on expeditions and learn science in the outdoors. And Hanalea, my youngest, goes to a private Montessori school where she gets a Montessori education. So each one has their own journey, and we deal with each one individually, which and our kids know that we're not a cookie cutter at home where everyone gets the same thing. Everyone gets exactly what they need, or at least we try to give them each what they need. And they recognize it because they see what's being done to them, that they're getting what they need and their siblings get what they need. So it's a little dose of our family experience.
Is any part of that homeschooling or?
No. We do what we're good at and we stay away from that which we're not good at. Homeschooling has never been something Chavi and I are very good at. I mean, not formal homeschooling. I think a lot of the education, majority of children's education come from
home experience,
living in the home and the role model of their parents. My bubby Esther told me once years ago, she said, yeshivas, they give only a little bit. Education comes from the mother and the father. And in her Brooklyn accent, she told me the education comes from the mother and the father. So I accept it. And there's a lot of validity to that. I can't say that school structure isn't important. It is. But as far as the Jewish side of it, if the parents are pumped and living embodiments of everything that's fun and exciting and exhilarating about Judaism, their kids will get a taste of that. But if the parents see Judaism as a burden, of course their kids see it as a burden. Why wouldn't they?
Well, Rabbi Chaim, watch out. Somebody who's here called iPad is coming to visit. Luis, actually, Chaim, I wanted to tell you that we were publicizing this event for tonight, and Rabbi Chaim Bruk is coming out, and there's a movie called, what's it called?
Rabbi Goes West.
Rabbi Goes West. Luis, that's your answer? So we publicized it, so somebody emailed me threatening to take away my firstborn child because I'm not paying for the rights to the movie. So yes, there's a wonderful movie called The Rabbi Goes West. I don't know if you want us to watch it, Rabbi Bruk, or you don't want us to watch it.
Absolutely.
But there it is. So Luis, yes, it's a very, very interesting story of the rabbi in Big Sky Country. All right, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi Bruk. Thank you to everybody for joining us between Zoom and Facebook. And we had over 45 people here tonight. So thank you so much. And God willing, we'll have a chance to come visit.
Shana Tova, Alabama.
Thank you, thank you. Shana Tova, a good year, umesuka, and a sweet year to everybody.
You will. Sei gesund.
Sei gewünscht, gut gewünscht, Jahr.